About 3 years ago, when we first began questioning the veracity of special relativity, our comment section was flooded with people telling us we were crazy and or crackpots for doing so, because special relativity had been empirically verified beyond any doubt, proven by experiments like the Michelson-Morley one or that of atmospheric muons or the GPS satellites. And these same commenters would also insist that attempts to give classical explanations to relativistic phenomena were pointless dead ends, as these phenomena could only be explained as expressions of our unique Minkowskian spacetime geometry. Well, it's nice to see that the needle has moved, because almost nobody is making those arguments anymore, and the people who used to seem to have conveniently forgotten that they ever did. And indeed, if you saw the latest video, the one thing we truly hope you take away from it is an understanding that special relativity isn't an empirical theory that's been proven by experiment. Rather, it's merely a theory that's consistent with empirical observation. And that there are other, equally valid, empirically consistent theories and formulations. And for the most part, we're extraordinarily proud of our audience and how far they've come in understanding a topic that even most professional physicists don't have a clear grasp on. But with that said, a full understanding of the implications of the one-way speed of light problem is still lagging. And so we wanted to take the time with this video to address some of those issues. Now, up front, the biggest objection this video received was that the existence of alternative formulations to a theory doesn't disprove that theory itself. And with that statement, we wholeheartedly and unreservedly agree. The merit of there simply being alternative formulations to relativity isn't what disproves the theory, and that was never our argument. So we rather feel that some of you weren't paying very close attention to the video. Now, to be fair, with the video, we were much more concerned with giving a full explication of the one-way speed of light problem, and we really wanted to be sure that our viewers understood the difference between concepts like the conventionality of simultaneity versus the relativity of simultaneity, and how they related to each other and to the foundations of relativity. As a result, the actual proof part of the video was rushed towards the end and kind of glossed over. So in a bit here, we're going to make it very clear what the actual argument was. But before we do that, we'd like to address some of the other objections and responses the video received. So we're going to take a quick perusal through the comment section. Alright, let's start with a comment from KingKiller1451. This doesn't remotely disprove relativity. Now, sociologically speaking, a remark like this comes from a place of insecurity and feeling threatened. Many have adopted relativity as a sort of secular religion, with Einstein as its prophet, and to them, it forms a very large part of their belief system and identity. And obviously, when a person's foundational faith and beliefs are questioned, it can be perceived as an existential threat. And the knee-jerk reaction is to discredit or negate, as we see here with this comment. And it's very likely the commenter has no actual understanding of the theory of relativity, as they are unable to offer any reasoning or argumentation to justify their stance. Instead, the reason they believe relativity to be correct is simply because their authority told them so. And in reality, this comment reads like they're trying to reassure themselves that their faith in their authority hasn't been misplaced. Our next comment comes from Tim Johnson 3913. A few times a year, Dialect comes out with a video that almost no modern physicist would disagree with except for the profound conclusion. The example here is in the video title. Again, this comment is a simple negation. The commenter claims to have the intellectual capacity to understand the argument, but rejects it without any supporting argumentation. Indeed, if the claim is that there's nothing in the video to be disagreed with, then it would follow that the conclusion is also not to be disagreed with. There must be something wrong in the argument, but the unwillingness of the commenter to identify that suggests that this comment is not a rational or logical one, but rather an emotional response, a cope. Next, we have this popular comment from Remo Janja 9326. Now, this is the video's top comment, and it was edited after the fact. Initially, the argument wasn't nearly as coherent, there weren't any paragraph breaks, and it kinda had a chat GTP vibe. But still, it rose through the ranks by being the most intelligent-sounding rebuttal within the quickest reach of that sort of viewer who found the video's subject matter to be discordant with their personal taste. Now, credits to the commenter for going back, fleshing out their argument, and making it much more readable. So this comment starts off strong by acknowledging the one-way speed of light problem and how it leads to alternative, empirically consistent formulations of special relativity. However, beginning in the second paragraph, the commenter hits us with a big straw man and misrepresents the argument. The existence of empirically equivalent formulations does not constitute a falsification of a physical theory. Now, again, with that statement, we completely agree. And again, that statement was not our argument. Things go further downhill in the third paragraph. Here the commenter states that Minkowskian space-time, i.e. invariant light, i.e. relative space and time, is not responsible for relativistic phenomena like time dilation or length contraction. Now, this paragraph is very well written, and it's correct in the sense that this is absolutely how you should regard special relativity. Special relativity does not make any claims about the ontological nature of space and time. But stop and think about that for a second. That is, this commenter is straight up telling you that special relativity does not say that time and space are relative. A theory called relativity, predicated on the notion that time and space are relative, does not actually tell you that time and space are relative. The commenter then writes that effects such as time dilation and length contraction are not caused by Minkowski spacetime. And again, that is the absolutely correct view that you should have, but it's not the theory of relativity. Consequently, the gaslighting begins when the commenter states that this is a standard formulation, as if to imply that this is the standard way the theory is taught or presented. And that is absolutely not the case. Special relativity is not presented as just a convenient mathematical formalism. It is presented as an explanation for that mathematical formalism and the phenomena it entails. Remember, the mathematical formalism had already been put into place before relativity by Lorentz and others. Relativity added nothing new to the math. It added philosophy to the math. It added an interpretation of that math. The interpretation that the strange electromagnetic phenomena that we observed weren't due to an ether, but to the relative nature of space and time. Make no mistake, the theory is presented as explaining relativistic phenomena as being a consequence of invariant light, i.e. relative space and time, i.e. Minkowskian geometry. The proof is literally everywhere. It's in textbooks, it's in Einstein's own writing, which we will get to in a minute, and it's everywhere in science communication. Go to any big physics channel, PBS Spacetime, Science Click, Floathead Physics, Sabine Hassenfelder. Go watch the videos and go read the comment sections. Absolutely nobody comes away with the impression that somehow relativity is just a formalism. Instead, you'll see them oohing and aahing over how mysterious and exciting the nature of relative space and time is. And the problem gets way worse in general relativity. Nobody teaching general relativity tells you that the space-time manifold is just a convenient mathematical formalism which describes gravity, and hence which makes no ontological claims about the nature of space and time. No, they tell you that gravity is a manifestation of space-time curvature, that it is the warping of the fabric of space and time. And make no mistake, you do not need manifolds, space-time curvature, metrics, geodesics, or any of the other mathematics of general relativity to describe and formulate the theory. Just as special relativity has alternative formulations, so too does general relativity, including formulations with universal space and time. But that's a video for another day, so let's go back to the comment. Think about it again for a moment. This commenter expects you to believe that special relativity has been around for 120 years without offering any explanation for its phenomena, and that everyone's just been okay with this. That no one ever stood up and said, hey, let's figure out the reason why a moving clock ticks slow. No, that didn't happen for 120 years because special relativity already offered an explanation. It offered the math, the geometry, the symmetry, and most importantly, invariant light as being the explanation or cause or reason. Now, something we've noticed in the past when we've exposed false notions, like when we called out multiple channels for presenting one-way light speed or invariant light as being empirical fact, or when people claimed that length contraction couldn't be explained by a cause and effect mechanism, and we showed that it could, is that these channels and people, despite clearly not being familiar with the subject, suddenly tried to act like as if they had known about it all along, that it were just some unimportant caveats that they hadn't thought to mention until now. That's essentially what this commenter is doing here. They're trying to save face for the establishment by acting as if every physicist in every institution for the last 120 years has already known that special relativity was just a convenient mathematical tool and nothing more. And undoubtedly, some physicists did probably come to that realization. But you have to remember that the so-called discovery of relative space and time has been lauded as one of the greatest intellectual achievements of the 20th century. Indeed, pretty much every book ever written on the subject begins with a discussion about how Einstein's theory either revolutionized or modified our ideas of space and time. And yet, here you have someone casually trying to tell you that physicists have known all along that the theory of relativity doesn't tell you anything about the nature of space and time. The gaslighting is absolutely fantastical. Now, a number of other commenters tried to suggest that it wasn't Einstein's interpretation that invariant light or relative space and time were responsible for relativistic phenomena, which is also some incredible gaslighting because that interpretation is all over his work, especially in the early years. Take this 1908 paper, for instance, called On the Principle of Relativity and Its Consequences. In this paper, Einstein discusses how Lorentz's ether theory can explain the results of the Michelson-Morley experiment, but he rejects that theory because he believes that the idea that all bodies must suffer a contraction in the direction of their motion to be too ad hoc. Instead, he argues that this phenomenon of length contraction can be explained by the relativity of simultaneity. That is, he writes, it requires no more than recognizing that what Lorentz has denoted local time is in fact generic time. In this case, the hypothesis of length contraction appears as an ineluctable consequence of the theory. Ineluctable consequence. By the way, we looked up the original German text and it reads exactly the same. Thus, we have Einstein here arguing that his theory is better than Lorentz's because his theory can explain length contraction whereas Lorentz's can't. And moreover, that it explains it through the relative nature of space and time. Now, you can find assertions being made like this all over Einstein's early works. But despite this, a lot of commenters insisted that because Einstein knew about the one-way speed of light problem, he also knew that his theory was merely a convention choice. Now, that first part is true. Einstein did know about the one-way speed of light problem. The surest evidence of this comes from his 1916 book, Relativity, the Special and General Theory, where he discusses the same circularity between sinking clocks and one-way speeds treated upon in the video. But nowhere did Einstein ever say or write that his theory was only a convention. Indeed, such a statement cannot be found in any of his works. The closest he came was this statement also in his 1916 book, where he stated that assuming isotropic invariant light was a stipulation made of his own free will in order to arrive at a definition of simultaneity. Now, from a modern perspective, this may sound as though he were acknowledging that invariant light was just a convention choice, but if you read it closely, that's not actually what he's saying. He's saying that you have to assume isotropic light in order to be able to define simultaneity in the first place. That is, he didn't believe there was any other proper definition of time, and therefore that time couldn't be defined at all without making such a stipulation. Which explains why, a few years later, his early works would be translated into English to read exactly that way. This is further supported by the fact that he referred to temporal measurements in his observers' frames as generic time or physical time, and also by the fact that he didn't believe that observers in different frames of reference could a priori assign the same time coordinates to the same event. Something he would have known were possible if he had understood anisotropic coordinates and the conventionality of simultaneity. Indeed, those concepts weren't first introduced until many years later by the philosopher Hans Reichenbach. Thus, though Einstein understood the circularity issue of the one-way speed of light problem, he never made it as far as to comprehend the conventionality of simultaneity or understand how the anisotropy of light could be exploited to assign universal space and time coordinates. That latter fact, by the way, wasn't discovered until the work of Manzuri and Sexel, which was well after Einstein's death. So no, Einstein didn't believe his theory was convention. He believed it was just the way space and time worked. Alright, let's summarize the facts of the case so far. 1. There exist equally valid, empirically consistent alternative formulations to the theory of special relativity. 2. Special relativity asserts that relativistic phenomena are an ineluctable consequence of invariant light, and hence that their behavior is directly tied to relative space and time. Now, it's not this first fact alone which disproves the theory of relativity, as many of the commenters tried to strawman us by suggesting. Rather, it's these two facts in conjunction which disproves the theory. Indeed, now we're in a position to clarify what the actual argument of the video was. It wasn't that the existence of an alternative formulation of a theory disproves that theory. Often in physics, the same theory can be formulated mathematically in many different ways. You're only going to run into trouble if you insist that a particular mathematical formulation is somehow necessary or unique. That is, if you have a set of different mathematical structures, all of which entail the same empirical content, then the existence of these different structures disproves a theory if and only if that theory asserts that its particular mathematical structure is responsible for that empirical content. So basically, special relativity asserts that relativistic phenomena are a consequence of its particular spacetime structure. But because this spacetime structure is entirely equivalent to a different spacetime structure, we can substitute one for the other, and by all the same reasoning employed by relativity, demonstrate that relativistic phenomena are a consequence of that other structure. We thus now have two reasons for and/or causes of the same empirical phenomena. And hence, under the assumption that the reason for something should be singular and unique, the theory is disproven. There's only one reason the sun rises in the sky. Likewise, there can only be one reason for relativistic phenomena. Now, we also want to reiterate that although special relativity's claim of spacetime structure being responsible for relativistic phenomena is disproven, you can still have a downgraded version of relativity, wherein light is still invariant, but such invariant light is not responsible for relativistic phenomena. Now, before you get too excited and go abusing Occam's razor, remember that the invariant light theory currently has no explanations for what causes relativistic phenomena, and so is basically a theory of magic. Additionally, you can easily disprove it if you invoke any sort of axioms related to ontological realism. But that's a discussion for another time. Lastly, at the end of the day, we know that relativity is simply just some people's religion, and that no amount of logic, reason, or evidence will convince them to the contrary. So yes, we certainly expect all the same shenanigans and silliness in the comments as before. But for those of you who still may not understand, but still leave comments in earnest good faith and out of a mutual desire to achieve a better understanding of our reality, you will always be appreciated here, and we will always welcome and listen to your voice. After all, nothing is ever truly certain. This has been Dialect. Thanks for watching.